Promissory notes, calling Deputy Shane Ross to move the motion. It's 40 minutes on this speaking start.
How long do I have, sorry?
15 minutes on this.
Thank you very much,
I just better say sharing with deputies Matthew McGrath, Maureen Sutton, Seamus Healy, Joan Collins, John Halligan.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy.
Councillor, in introducing this motion, I think this could be a defining motion and a defining issue for the government and for the fate of the government and the opinion of people in the government's performance. And so far, the omens are not good. The omens are that the government has been conducting a negotiation for a long period of time which has been singularly unsuccessful. Indeed, there is evidence from the international media, from Europe, from leaks from the European Central Bank, that already the government's policy has been rejected out of hand, and the government's proposals have been rejected out of hand by the powers that be in Europe. It seems to me that the danger of humiliation before the 31st of March are extremely acute, because what the government is proposing is that the loan or the promissory notes should be extended, the repayments should be extended for many years, and instead of taking a political hit themselves now, that the grandchildren and the children of Ireland should take the hit for them. In other words, they are seeking a solution which spares their own political blushes in the immediate period, but means that future generations have to pay for the blunders of bankers in the past. This motion looks for a fundamental change in government policy in its approach to the Anglo-Irish promissory notes. And for anyone to say, as the amendment does, by implication that it's too late, they're wrong. Last year, March 2012, a deal was cobbled together at the last minute to save the government's face. This year, there is still time, nearly 8 weeks, for the government to go to the ECB, to go to the Commission, to go to Mrs. Merkel and others and say, we have changed our policy. We no longer believe that it pays to be craven and to be good Europeans and to be the poster boy of Europe. We are taking a stand on behalf of the people and the taxpayers of Ireland, and for once, we're going to put Irish people first. Because it seems to me that the negotiations are now in chaos. If international reports are to be believed, only a few days ago, maybe a week, maybe two, the European Central Bank threw out the government's long-term project, long-term proposals, that there should be a long-dated bond of maybe 40 years, which would extend the loans for a period which would relieve the government of embarrassment, but which would, in fact, not make any difference to the capital sum which we are asking for to be changed in this motion tonight. And the Minister can tell me, maybe, and can tell the House, because there's so little information coming from the government today, was a government plan torpedoed after 13 months by the ECB within the last few weeks? Did they say no? This is monetary financing, in other words, printing money. Did they say it is not acceptable to us? Go back to the drawing board. And are they now in the situation where they're going to come to the Irish people within a few weeks and present a completely new deal as some great triumph? Because I have no doubt, Councillor, I have no doubt whatsoever that a deal will be done. But I have no doubt as well that this deal will be a humiliation for Ireland, unless the government takes note of what's in this particular motion tonight. Because what we have seen in the last 13 months, after a series of false dawns, new promises over egg puddings, is a pattern of humiliation for Ireland. It's not just what happened this time last year, when we've been promised so clearly that a deal would be presented to us, that at the last minute they had to cobble something together. It is the number of deadlines that have been missed as politicians from that side of the House, ministers and others have said that a deal is nearby. We were promised one in October, we were promised one later, we've been promised optimistic noises. That pattern is something which I suggest is about to come to a climax when we get a very bad deal at the end of this month, which will be, indeed, which will be portrayed as some sort of a triumph. That pattern is being repeated as well in the story of the legacy debt, which last May was greeted as a game changer. And ever since then, that pattern has been repeated as the government has been in retreat in the face of opposition from the Finns, the Germans and the Netherlands, who have said that that issue of legacy debt is not one on which they interpret the same meaning as our government does. And the chickens are coming home to roost for us, because we are consistently, as a nation, backtracking in our dealings with Europe and with the ECB. 13 months of negotiation have yielded nothing. Now we're in a situation where we have to somehow come up with something which we present as a triumph. It'll be interesting to see if we can do that. But we're looking for something from this side of the House far more radical. We're looking for the government to challenge Europe. Not to say yes, but to say no. Not to say we'll do what we're told, but to say we are a nation. To say we have ideas, and we stand on certain principles. And one of those principles is that this debt, for which the promissory notes are some palliative, is not a debt owed by the Irish people. It is a debt which is owed by the banks, both of which have now gone bankrupt, and which the Irish people should not be paying and have absolutely no moral obligation to pay at all. You only have to observe the panic that has existed in political circles in recent weeks to realize that what I'm saying is evidenced by statements from government ministers. It was the Taoiseach who went out to South America and was reported there as saying that if a deal was not agreed, it would be catastrophic, and was informally reported to have warned in various capitals of the world that if a deal was not agreed, the government might fall, that there would be a general election. That contrasts, of course, very strongly with the Minister for Energy's and Telecommunications statement that a deal would be done. I think the Minister Rabbit is right. A deal will be done. The colour of the deal will be humiliating. But why would any minister of this government regard it as a threat to his European partners that the government would fall? Why should they care? They care because they regard this government as complicit, an easy mark, people who negotiate with their hands behind their back and accept it. And it is an effective weapon to play if you are the puppet of European leaders and the people are your pawns. And that's the situation in which we find ourselves, I'm afraid, today. If the government's only weapon is to go out and say, if you let us down, we'll go out of power, they're playing the wrong game. Because yes, I think it is right. I think it's correct. I don't think Mrs. Merkel, Monsieur Hollande, or any of the other powerful people in Europe want to see this government out of power. Why should they? They're so compliant, they'll never get another government as compliant in their wishes. They're a pushover in negotiations in Europe, not only on the legacy debt, but on the Anglo-Irish promissory notes. And it is time that they stood up for Ireland and said, we are unwilling, as this motion says, and unable, as a nation, to pay this debt. And you know what's going to come back from the government? The government's going to come back and say, the ATMs won't open. There's been a threat of terrible economic war from the ECB in Europe. I wonder. You know, Patrick Honohan was asked that question at the Finance Committee a few weeks ago. He said the ATMs will open. The threat of economic war is one which has never been tested or challenged. But what we want to do here is transfer this problem. We want to say that debt should be shared amongst the European nations, because it is not solely ours. At the moment, the government's attitude is quite simple. It says that debt is the debt of Irish people, and we accept it. I do not accept that it's the debt of Irish people, and nor do others in our group. We believe it should be shared by the nations of those and the heads and the finances of those who are equally responsible. Because others were responsible for lending at a banking level, not at a people's level, not at a taxpayer's level. It is bankers who are responsible for making these loans, and it is the governments of all the nations of Europe who bear a responsibility for this. I don't think that we should be ashamed or intimidated by asking for a write-off. I'm sick and tired of that being somehow painted as default in a derogatory way. Yeah, let's go in and negotiate it. Let's not pay it because it's not ours. And let's be unashamedly in favor of sharing that debt with others. Giancola, I think we've seen a long pattern of a government over-egging the pudding. We've seen a situation where the hopes of the Irish people have been raised extraordinarily high. The statements by ministers that a deal will be done and a good deal will be done was a terrible hostage to fortune by the government, which have raised the expectations of people to a level on which they find now they may not be able to deliver. Because there will be a high price to pay if people are disappointed by this. Because the expectation is this. The expectation in people's minds and the association is this, that if a good deal is done on the promissory notes, that relief will come to Ireland and to Irish people and to taxpayers and to social welfare payers in the next budget. That is patently not going to happen if we pursue the course that we're pursuing at the moment. It is patently not going to happen if we don't get a deal which involves write-off.
2 minutes remaining.
Sorry?
2 minutes remaining.
And what the Taoiseach has said, and this is what's so disappointing about government policy, and he threw in the towel before he even started, is they have not even ever looked for write-off. That means that they are simply looking to extend and pretend. We are on the brink, I think, of signing up for a very long-term economic disaster. I think we should think of future generations before we actually take this extraordinary step. I think we should think of the consequences for people down the line before we transfer the debt onto people, some of whom are not even born at this stage. I'm disappointed, deeply disappointed, with the amendment from the government. It's bland, it's uninformative. It says that it recognises that the current negotiations approach is the best course of action in order to achieve agreement with our European partners. I'd like to hear from the Minister for Finance. What is this current approach? What has been achieved in the last 13 months? What have they got, and what are they going to offer to the Irish people before the 31st of March? I believe that we need a radical change in policy, a U-turn which puts the interests of the Irish people first and not Europe, which challenges the powers that be in Europe and tells them it is not our debt, we will not pay it, and we cannot pay it. Thank you, Kirkconnell.